Hello, and welcome back to the Stories of Northern Life podcast, brought to you by the Sault Ste. Marie Museum. I'm your host, Nicole, and today I bring you our final episode in our SPOOKYTOBER series. So as I said last week, this episode is going to be a little bit different than normal. So today we are talking about the Kinross Incident of 1953, or the Kinross UFO Incident. And I first heard of this from a research request that somebody had asking if we had anything on the Kinross UFO Incident. And I looked into it. We don't have anything, but it started getting me intrigued in this mystery of, was there actually a UFO in 1953? And so UFO is just standard for unidentified flying object. Now usually we refer to them as UAPs, unidentified aerial phenomena. And so UFO doesn't necessarily mean alien, but if you look up this article that the guy sent me talking about this incident, they're definitely leaning a little bit more towards it was alien activity. And a lot of UFO sites have this incident on their sites. They talk about it a lot. So most often, if you search up the Kinross Incident of 1953, you'll come up with a lot of UFO and alien sites. However, there's one site I was able to find that had a really good in-depth look at the case and everything. So it has the background, all the events of the evening, the search, and all the conspiracies surrounding it, and why some people might think it's aliens. And so this is a very good in-depth sort of, I guess, it's not really an article, it's from the openskiesproject.org news site, and they have a whole page on the Kinross Incident. And so it is, I don't know, probably over 7,000 words of information. So very good, very in-depth, a lot of detail explaining everything, and a lot of citing their sources. So let's get into the case. On the cold night of November 23rd, 1953, a U.S. Air Force jet vanished over Lake Superior while trying to intercept an unidentified aircraft. Despite extensive search efforts, no trace of the jet or its crew was ever found. This mysterious disappearance has sparked decades of speculation, including theories involving UFOs. So let's look at the background. During this time was the Cold War, so the U.S. was rapidly expanding its air defense system. The 30th Air Division, which was just newly formed in February 1953, was responsible for defending the Upper Great Lakes. And several radar stations and squadrons were involved in this Kinross incident. So all of these are really brand new, all set up. So they're not super cutting edge technology. So that's another reason why there's a lot of speculation around this case, because all of this was new information, like all these new tools that they were using. And so there's not a lot of information that we have that was able to gather with all the testing. So we have codename Horsefly, which was the 30th Air Division headquarters at Willow Run Air Force Station. Codename Pillow, which was the 665th Air Control and Warning, or AC&W Squadron, at Calumet Air Force Station, or the Keweenaw Radar Site. Codename Naples, which was the 753rd AC&W Squadron at Sault Ste. Marie Air Force Station. And then at the Kinross Air Force Base, it was the home to the 534th Air Defense Group. the 438th Fighter Interceptor Squadron, and it was also the temporary home of the 433rd Fighter Interceptor Squadron, which was based out of Truax. So in mid-October, the 438th Fighter Interceptor Squadron went to Arizona for gunnery training, and so with that, the 433rd Fighter Interceptor Squadron from Truax maintained alerts both at their base in Truax and in Kinross. On November 23rd, the 433rd Squadron had 4 F-89C Scorpion jets on alert. So aircraft 51-5853A, which is the one we'll be looking at tonight, had its inspection in the morning, passed, and then it was placed in the hangar on a 5-minute alert status, meaning that in 5 minutes or less, it could be ready and airborne. And the day was overcast and had scattered snow showers that were developing in the evening. Now, earlier in the day, 11:45 a.m., the jet was scrambled and returned to the base an hour later, reporting that everything was okay. It received its post-flight check, and then it returned to the first in line in the alert status. So the jet that we're talking about already went on one run that day, and it got double checked, and it was once again at the number 1 position. So here's the events of the evening. 6:15 p.m. Radar at Pillow detected an unknown aircraft over Lake Superior, believed to be a Canadian C-47 Dakota flying from Winnipeg to Sudbury. And the U.S. was reporting it was about 48 kilometers off course and thus classified as unknown. So Kinross Air Force Base was ordered to scramble a jet. 6:22 p.m. The F-89C plane 51-5853A, call sign Avenger Red, piloted by Lieutenant Felix Moncla Jr. with Lieutenant Robert Wilson as radar operator, took off. 6:53 p.m. Radio signals were weak, but the radar tracking was strong. Avenger Red was told to proceed at their own discretion with the intercept. 6:47 p.m. Avenger Red adjusted course and descended. At 6:52 p.m. Moncla acknowledged the target was 10 miles ahead, but after that, no further responses were received. 6:51 p.m. Pillow directed Avenger Red to adjust heading to 20 degrees to intercept the target. 6:52 p.m. Avenger Red informed that the target was at their 11 o'clock, 10 miles out. Pilot Felix Moncla Jr. acknowledged. Pillow gave another range and heading report, but did not receive a response. 6:55 p.m. Radar showed Avenger's Red blip merging with the unknown aircraft. The IFF signal disappeared and all radio contact was lost. The last known position was 48.0 degrees north by 86.49 degrees west. And now the IFF is the thing that detects friend or foe, and so all signals from Avenger Red were gone. Now, in the immediate response, Lieutenant William Minchbach in another F-89C requested to fly a Combat Air Patrol, or CAP. His aircraft, call sign Avenger Black, took off at 7:15 p.m. with orders to approach the last known location for Avenger Red and attempt contact. So as the ground radar was not able to contact the plane, they were hoping that another jet that was approaching would have a stronger signal and would be able to detect Avenger Red. So at 7:53 p.m., he and his radar operator believed they heard a brief transmission from Moncla, and several attempts were thus made to contact Avenger Red by radio, but they went unanswered. Heavy icing was reported in lower altitudes, and the low cloud ceiling and snow showers made visibility difficult. Another jet, Avenger Purple, so this one was a little bit more equipped to handle the icing. It was sent off, and it took off at 7:46 p.m. to assist. It was equipped to descend through the clouds and check for icing. Both aircraft searched the area but found nothing. At 8:07 p.m., Avenger Red would have run out of fuel. The base declared it overdue. Avenger Black and Avenger Purple were ordered to return to Kinross. At 9:50 p.m., Captain William Bridges attempted a search flight but had to turn back due to bad weather. Now, the search and rescue. At 10 p.m., Canadian rescue teams were contacted, but due to weather, they couldn't depart until the next morning, which would be November 24th. The U.S. Coast Guard and the 49th Air Rescue Squadron began searching with aircraft and vessels. The search areas were expanded based on the assumption that Moncla might have turned toward home. Over the next few days, more aircraft joined, including SA-16s, C-45s, B-25s, C-47s, and a helicopter from the U.S., a Cessna 140 from the Civil Air Patrol, 4 C-47s from the Royal Canadian Air Force. But despite covering 80% of the search area, no wreckage was found, and a lot of their searching was actually hampered by the weather. So I was able to find some little articles in the Sioux Star that was talking about how there was a missing jet and how the Canadians were assisting the Americans in this search, but that they were hampered a lot by the weather, and after a few days they had to give up the search. And now we move on to public reports. So on November 25th, a mail carrier reported a wreckage near Cut River Bridges, but it was dismissed as rocks. November 27th, a report of wreckage on a Canadian mountainside, but nothing was found. And then a witness in Limmer, Ontario, saw a low-flying aircraft, and it was initially dismissed due to timing. So even with all these public reports and searches, nothing has ever been found. Then we move on to April 1954. The Limmer witness revised their timeline, prompting a renewed search, but no results were documented. Then we move on to 1968 discovery. And so prospectors found aircraft debris near Alona Bay, Ontario, and it was possibly military, but it was later dismissed as unrelated to the F-89, and no further details are known. Since it was in Canada, the Canadian government didn't really have anything to report, and they never reported anything to the US about it. And now there is the Great Lakes dive hoax. So a man named Adam Jimenez claimed his company found the missing F-89 using sonar. He posted images showing a mostly intact jet and a mysterious object nearby. However, Brendan Bellad, a maritime historian, found no record of Jimenez or his company. He believed the images were likely taken from Air Force archives and not from a real dive. The website vanished and Jimenez disappeared. So somebody was trying to probably get a claim to fame and say that they discovered the plane wreckage and saying that it sunk in Lake Superior. Now, it is most likely that the plane did disappear in Lake Superior as it was flying over there. There was searches all along the shores and everything, and nothing has ever been found. So It is likely in Lake Superior, but it was definitely not discovered by Adam Jimenez. Then we move on to the next section that is looking at unclear evidence and debated explanation. So from the Open Skies Project, you can see that they've compiled from many official sources as possible. The story that is painted the story they have paints a picture of an unfortunate accident where some type of failure caused the F-89C to crash into Lake Superior during the interception of the bogey. Bad weather, typical of Lake Superior in November, hampered any recovery efforts, and the pilot and radar operator were considered KIA, killed in action. So what is the conspiracy behind this incident, and where did it come from? Why did this incident become associated with UFO stories? There are seemingly more UFO researchers and websites that discuss the event than any other source, and they all have varying accounts of what happened. Some say the unidentified aircraft was spotted near the Sioux Locks. Some say the F-89 Scorpion actually chased the UFO across the lake. Some give different accounts of the radio transmission between the pilot and GCI controllers, and some imply that the UFO disappeared off the radar shortly after the two dots merged. The origin of some of these details are completely unknown and may simply be embellishments to add more mystery or excitement to the story. But another thing that sort of points to UFOs and sort of, I guess, aliens is the grave of Lieutenant Felix Moncla Jr. And it reads, "In loving memory of Gene Felix Eugene Moncla Jr., First Lieutenant, United States Air Force, born October 21st, 1926, disappeared November 23rd, 1953, intercepting a UFO over Canadian border as pilot of a F-89 jet plane." And so there on his gravestone, it says UFO. Another big thing that points to aliens is a book by Donald Kehoe, and so he's pretty much the source of many of these discrepancies. According to the Open Skies Project, many of the unsupported claims surrounding the Kinross incident appear to originate from Major Donald Kehoe's 1955 book, The Flying Saucer Conspiracy. Kehoe was a prominent UFO researcher and author throughout the 50s, 60s, and 70s, and his work significantly influenced public perceptions of UFOs. Kehoe's narrative and its inconsistencies. So, in his book, Kehoe describes a dramatic scenario. A blip of an unknown machine appeared on radar. The ground control intercept office took a quick look. The unknown was flying over the Sioux Locks, and no aircraft was scheduled near that important target. He claims that an F-89 Scorpion from Kinross Field, a repeated misspelling of Kinross. So instead of Kinross, he spells it Kimross. And now it might seem kind of silly. Okay, yeah, he has a spelling error, but it's something that he repeatedly spells wrong. And so if there's a misspelling of the main place where this incident occurred, even the name of this incident, the Kinross Incident, it kind of doesn't leave a lot of credibility to possibly the rest of his material, as how well is that researched if he doesn't even have the name of the main location correct. And so he's claiming that this F-89 Scorpion was scrambled to intercept the object, and it was guided by ground control Lieutenant Felix Moncla, who climbed steeply toward the unknown target. However, the Open Skies Project points out several issues with a version of events. For example, Sault Ste. Marie Air Force Station, known by its call sign Naples, was located just 3.5 miles away from the Sioux Locks and was equipped with radar capable of detecting objects over 200 miles away. So it seems kind of implausible that an unidentified object would suddenly appear in such a well-monitored airspace, unless some UFO theorists suggest it was using advanced cloaking technology. But Kehoe continues. Back at GCI, the controller watched the jet's blip on his glowing radar scope. As it moved toward the UFO's blip, the strange craft changed course. The controller called Moncla gave him the new bearing. From the scope, he saw that the F-89 was now over Sault Ste. Marie, though to the crew, the city's lights would be only a blur, quickly lost behind. So he describes the UFO flying as fast as a jet airliner heading toward Lake Superior, with the F-89 chasing it across Whitefish Bay at over 500 miles per hour. After 9 minutes, the F-89 had nearly caught up. Kehoe writes that the radar operator should have the UFO on short-range radar by then. But this part of the story raises questions. If Moncla was given a new bearing while already over Sault Ste. Marie, and considering the jet's speed, the UFO would have had to remain over the city for 4 to 5 minutes. So if it did that, a lot more people would have spotted this UFO. But it's also a significant detail that Kehoe doesn't mention, that it would have just been hovering over the city. Also, the short distance between the Kinross and Sioux Locks means the jet likely wasn't flying at full speed, which would have allowed it to reach the area in under a minute. But anyway, Kehoe continues. Target should be visual, still bearing. He broke off, staring at the scope. The two blips suddenly merged into one. Whether the strange machine had abruptly slowed or Moncla unaccountably had put on full power, no one in the room could tell. But one thing seemed grimly certain: the two machines were locked together as if in a smashing collision. This moment is often cited in UFO literature. However, as the Open Skies Project explains, it reflects a misunderstanding of 1950s radar technology. Radar resolution at the time was relatively low, and when two aircraft came within a half mile of each other, their blips would merge on the screen. This doesn't necessarily mean a collision occurred, it simply means the radar couldn't distinguish between them anymore. But Kehoe adds, for a moment longer, the huge, ominous blip remained on the glass, then it quickly went off the scope. Marking the position, the controller flashed word to search and rescue. Moncla and Wilson might have bailed out in time. Both had life jackets and self-inflating rafts. Even in the icy water, they might survive for a little while. This is the first version of the story where the radar blip disappears entirely. However, official reports cited by the Open Skies Project state that the radar contact continued on its original flight path after the blip merged, suggesting the unknown aircraft kept moving and the F-89 simply vanished. Kehoe's book goes on to describe his conversations with Air Force personnel and his own analysis of the incident. His account diverges significantly from official reports, and many of the discrepancies found in later retellings of the Kinross incident seem to originate from his version. While Kehoe's narrative is compelling and helped popularize the UFO theory, the Open Skies Project emphasizes that his account contains factual errors, technical misunderstandings, and dramatic embellishments. These elements have contributed to the enduring mystery and confusion surrounding the Kinross incident, but they also highlight the importance of relying on verified sources and technical documentation when investigating historical events. Now, one of the big questions is, why didn't they contact the Canadian C-47? So one puzzling aspect of the Kinross incident is why the U.S. Air Force didn't attempt to contact the Canadian C-47 aircraft before scrambling an interceptor. The official report confirms that communications only occurred after the F-89 disappeared, suggesting that contact was possible but not prioritized. The Open Skies project suggests this may have been due to the Air Force using such situations as training opportunities. So at the time, successful interceptions were tracked as performance metrics, and the F-89 had already flown a mission earlier that day. New radar and IFF systems had recently been installed at Calumet Air Force Station, or Pillow, and the F-89Cs had undergone major upgrades, further motivating the Air Force to conduct practice intercepts. In fact, Calumet Air Force Station reported a shortage of intercepts, prompting controllers to be reassigned to other stations to meet operational goals. In 2004, researcher Gord Heath contacted Gerald Fosburge, the pilot of the C-47. Fosburge confirmed that his aircraft was flying at night over a cloud deck and was contacted only after the F-89 vanished. He recalled being asked if he had seen another aircraft, but he hadn't. He later received a call from Kinross about the missing jet, but had no further information. Fosburge also stated his flight path was a direct route from Fort William to Sault Ste. Marie, contradicting the U.S. claim that the C-47 was 30 miles or about 48 kilometers off course. The reason given for initiating the intercept, as we know. However, the 300-degree heading mentioned in the official report does align with the general direction of his flight, adding complexity to the case. So here we see that the Canadians are saying, no, our plane was on course, but why was the American radar detecting that it was 30 miles off course? Perhaps that is showing the inaccuracies with our radar, and maybe that's why Moncla and his jet were lost, because of issues with this radar. Maybe that was due in part to the weather, or there was something with the radar, or a combination of both. Bad weather and radar interacted together and led them to detect the Canadian plane off course and direct Moncla into sort of this unknown direction. And now looking at other minor discrepancies. So there are allegations that the Air Force provided differing accounts to the family of Felix Moncla regarding his fate. In one instance, it was reported that the jet crashed into Lake Superior, while in another, a different group reportedly informed the family that the jet exploded mid-air. However, we have not been able to find reliable sources. However, the Open Skies project hasn't been able to find reliable sources to substantiate these claims, though their search continues. There are also claims that the Air Force said Moncla suffered from vertigo. This is actually what you can see if you search Felix Moncla on Wikipedia. They talk about how he suffered from vertigo. So this is sort of something that appears to be in somewhat of an official narrative. Again, we cannot... Open Skies Project cannot find any official source of that claim yet. That's sort of what the sort of online sources keep saying, where he had the vertigo, but there's no official reports that actually state that. So if these reports are true, it would be unusual, because in the official accident report, it claims that there were no medical issues that were a factor in the crash. So if they're saying there's no like if he had vertigo and he was suffering from that, would have likely caused the plane crash. But if they're saying in the official report that there were no medical issues, then the vertigo doesn't really exist. It's nothing. And also, if you're a pilot suffering from vertigo, I don't think you would be put on active duty, and definitely not alert status, let alone first in line alert status. Now let's look at a little bit of technical information. So the F-89 Scorpion jet was the first U.S. jet interceptor. The C model had some serious issues. There was notes of engine failure, structural instability, and mid-air disintegrations. So that could also be a likely factor of what happened to the plane. There was failure with the plane and it went down in Lake Superior. So nothing to do with Moncla. It wasn't his fault. It was just a poorly designed jet. But after some modifications, performance was limited to 80% of its potential. The aircraft was flown by Moncla, had known limitations at both height and low altitudes. And so at the time, because of the clouds, when you're going low, you were having issues of sort of there being these snow showers, so you wanted to get above the clouds, so then there would be limits with going over the clouds because of the height limitations. Now, several crashes did occur around the same time with other F-89C jets. November 23rd, 1953, so the same day, another F-89 crashed near Madison, Wisconsin, hours before Moncla's disappearance. December 2nd, 1952, an F-94B Starfire disappeared en route to Kinross. So this is a little bit of a later version of the sort of same type of jet, and it was having issues. And then now let's look at the radar equipment. So the radar used at Calumet Air Force Station had a half-mile resolution. When two aircraft came within that range, their blips merged. The radar could detect sudden altitude changes unless the height finder was focused on that target. Then there's radar shadows, and the area radar can't see due to the Earth's curvature, and this could have hidden a low altitude crash. If the jet descended below 1,000 feet, it might have vanished from radar. So, in conclusion, the Kinross incident remains one of the most mysterious aviation disappearances in North American history. Despite extensive searches and investigation, no definitive answers have emerged. While mechanical failure is a plausible explanation, inconsistencies in reports and the influence of UFO researchers like Donald Keyhoe have kept the mystery alive. The 2006 hoax further fueled speculation. Ultimately, the case highlights the limitations of 1950s technology and the challenges of Cold War era aviation. The fate of Lieutenant Moncla and Lieutenant Wilson remains unknown, and the mystery endures. So I hope you enjoyed today's episode. As I said, it was a little bit different for our usual thing that we do for Spookytober. If you know of anything about the Kinross incident, please let me know. Feel free to reach out, nicole@siumuseum.ca. And next week we are going to be discussing the Edmund Fitzgerald, as it is the 50th anniversary this year of when she sank, and we will be having a special exhibit in the museum. So if you are in the Sioux next week and all the way up until November 17th, consider stopping by the museum and taking a look at our little pop-up exhibit on the Edmund Fitzgerald and her 50th anniversary. So as always, thanks for listening. Bye.
If you enjoyed this episode, you might like our blog too. Head over to our website, SUMuseum, that's SAULT museum.ca, and look under Discover. You will find our blog, Museum Musings. We share a short synopsis of influential people, historic places, and impactful events in our history. Pictures are always included, and you will be sure to learn a little something new with each post.